We came across the buffalo. There were about 450 of them. Several sort of yearlings and one or two really small calves that we could see. All around that area there were signs that these buffalo had been resident here for some time. Now that the rains are starting to fall, I'm sure we'll have a flurry of births in the near future. This herd of buffalo will also get the freedom to start heading south again to where the Kakaneka Pride is. They are drawn right up north by vegetation. It's their eating that sort of drives these great herds. Enough grass to sustain their numbers. Just very important for us to understand where these buffalo are going and the reason why they are going out of this area. I look forward to the rains that are coming and the return of these herds to where the Kakaneka Pride is.
This is the first time that we visited this family of meerkats. I thought that perhaps we had missed the main group, but eventually it turned out that there were only 3 in this family. Because it was such a small group, I understood that they were so alert and typically, again, constantly up on their hind legs and constantly looking around. Their sense of hearing is apparently similar to humans, but they have an acute sense of smell, and this helps them find the insects and grubs that is often buried in the soil. Those long claws are very adept at digging for these insects and grubs, which they can do with remarkable speed. And then I saw the pregnant female. She seemed very pregnant, in fact. Gestation is about 75 days or 11 weeks, and they give birth to 1 to 5 young at a time. This happens mainly in the rainy season, so it seems right for this area, but it can happen at any time of year. I concentrated on the pregnant female because I wanted to see how active she would be, but I could hardly notice any difference in the activities. You could clearly see the swollen belly and the mammary glands. She did seem to be conscious of the other 2 individuals in the group, and she was constantly checking that they were nearby. It's impressive to see how incredibly stable they are as soon as they're up on their hind legs with tails for support, completely static and steady, no wobbling. What I did notice, though, is that they tended to stick to the longer grass. Very often these families are more in the open. Perhaps this was a form of protection again because it was such a small group. I was left with a brief and strong impression of 2 members of this group, a moment that they shared together.
There were big thunderclouds in front of us, and they were moving rapidly in our direction. between claps of thunder, we noticed brightly colored millipedes. I know them as shongololo, and I've never seen the yellow type. I'm more familiar with the common black variety, which are found in my garden. They were feeding on decaying plant matter at the base of a tree trunk, and the head was swaying from side to side, sweeping for food, and the mandibles picking and scooping at debris. Hundreds of legs followed behind in 2 military rows, surging forward, moving in formation as they rippled forward. The rain had collected in little drops on its shiny exoskeleton. Thunder got louder and louder, and the rain fell harder. But the shongololo didn't seem to be affected by the weather conditions and continued to feed.
The reef begins at about 5 meters and slowly tumbles away, reaching the edge at about 18 meters where it finally falls down into the blue abyss below. Immediately I began to notice the amount of Gorgonian hard corals that we find here. This beautiful fan coral is about 1 meter across. We made our way slightly further down the reef, and as I peered into this little nook, I noticed there's a lot of tiny fish fry and I'm sure all different species from around the reef taking shelter. No doubt within this lot there's a lot of crustaceans too, which will form the basis of the food sources here on the reef. This stunning whip coral was absolutely enormous in size. The tiny polyps on it will sift nutrients from the water. It's anchored at one point to the rock surface itself, and the other will stick up to 2.5 meters into the current. But what I found today was even more special than that, this tiny whip coral goby. No bigger than 1 inch long. They're extremely hard to spot, as whatever side of the whip coral you tend to be on, they prefer to be on the opposite. These tiny little fish will pick off zooplankton that passes in the water column. As I moved around, he decided to scoot down, trying to avoid my attention, heading closer to the reef.